She didn't steal money first. She stole credibility. Mary Stephen walked into her in-laws' home, sat at their kitchen table, and surgically removed her husband from his own family's trust, one tearful sentence at a time. No shouting. No confrontation. Just the quiet, devastating efficiency of a woman who understood that the most powerful move is the one your opponent never sees coming. For 2 years, Stephen Deckline carried the weight of a resignation he never submitted, in a company his grandfather built, while his wife positioned herself as the one person holding the family together. She attended the dinners. She made the calls. She introduced the outside investors. She filed the invoices. And she did all of it with the composed, unhurried confidence of someone who had already accounted for every variable. Every variable except one. Viewers, have you ever trusted someone so completely that their betrayal felt like a physical blow to your chest? Have you ever realized too late that someone you loved had been building an exit strategy inside your own life? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Because what Stephen found in that shared email archive at 2 in the morning did not just end a marriage, it dismantled everything Mary thought she had already won. Viewers, before we continue, please subscribe, like and share. My name is Stephen Deckline. I am 38 years old, and I run operations for Deckline & Sons Construction, a company my grandfather built from cracked hands and borrowed concrete in Charlotte, North Carolina. We have a lake house, 2 daughters who smell like sunscreen and laughter, and a reputation in this city that took 3 generations to earn. For most of my adult life, I believed I was a careful man. I studied people. I read rooms. I trusted slowly and loved deliberately. My grandfather used to say the ground always tells you what it can hold, you just have to listen before you pour. I stopped listening somewhere around year 4 of my marriage. That was my first mistake. My wife's name was Mary Stephen. She was precise and poised, and she smiled like someone who had already won the argument you hadn't started yet. I thought that was confidence. I was wrong. What I'm about to tell you cost me 2 years of my father's respect, my place inside my own family's legacy, and the version of myself that still believed people show you who they are. They do. We just don't always want to see it. It was a Tuesday in October when my father called me, and I knew before I answered that something was wrong. Roland Deckline did not call midday. He sent emails, brief and structured, like internal memos addressed to his own son. So when his name lit up my screen at 12:47 p.m., I set down my hard hat and stepped away from the site. The voice on the other end was flat in a way I had never heard from him, not angry, not grieving, just emptied out, like a man who had already finished feeling something and was now simply reporting it. He said he was disappointed in me. He said he had given me everything, and I had walked away. I asked him what he was talking about. The pause that followed was so long I checked the signal bars on my phone. Then he said it, Mary told us. 3 weeks ago. That you resigned. That you've been looking at positions in Austin. That you told her this company was beneath you. My chest went cold. I had never resigned. I had never mentioned Austin to anyone. And the word beneath had never once left my mouth about the company my grandfather bled to build. But my father had already decided. I could hear the concrete in his silence. Mary and I met at a fundraiser in downtown Charlotte 9 years before that phone call, and even then, something in her watched the room differently than everyone else. She catalogued people, their shoes, their handshakes, the confidence gap between what they said and how they stood. I found it attractive once. I called it awareness. Her father had run a real estate firm that collapsed in 2008, and the humiliation of that fall had never fully left her body. She carried it quietly, the way certain people carry old injuries, invisible until the weather changes. She wanted weight. She wanted a name that didn't require explanation. I gave her mine. What I didn't know was that long before our wedding, Mary had tried to position herself inside Deckline & Sons directly. She had suggested, gently and then less gently, an advisory role. My father had redirected her with a politician's smile. My Uncle Frank had been considerably less gracious. She remembered both responses. She filed them somewhere behind those steady brown eyes and waited. So while I stood frozen on a job site absorbing my father's disappointment, Mary had already been sitting in my parents' Concord kitchen 3 weeks earlier, pearls at her neck, hands folded, voice trembling just enough, telling them their son had abandoned everything. She even cried. I know because my mother told me, much later, that it was the most heartbroken she had ever seen a woman look. I confronted her that same night. The girls were in bed, the wine was untouched, and the kitchen light was too bright for the conversation we were about to have. I laid it out plainly, my father's call, the resignation he believed I'd submitted, the word Austin, the word beneath. I watched her face the entire time. She didn't flinch. Not once. She looked at me with those steady brown eyes and said she had been protecting me. That I had been miserable at the company for years and was too proud to say it. That she was buying us time until her plan came together. I asked her what plan. She said I wouldn't understand yet. I should have pushed harder. I should have called my father back that same night and dismantled her story brick by brick. But there was something in her certainty, something so unshakable and architectural, that made me briefly doubt my own memory. My father was not a man who revisited decisions. He had frozen out his own brother for 6 years over a single contract dispute. I knew what it meant to be on the wrong side of Roland Decline's judgment without airtight proof. So I waited. I told myself it was strategy. Looking back, it was fear dressed up as patience, and Mary had counted on exactly that. For 2 years, my parents treated me like a stranger wearing their last name. My mother stopped calling. My father communicated through my Uncle Frank, brief, transactional updates, as though I were a subcontractor and not his firstborn son. At company events I still attended, still dressed for, still performed inside, my father would shake my hand like we had just been introduced. It hollowed something out in me that I didn't have words for then. Mary, meanwhile, became extraordinarily present in my absence. She attended my mother's garden luncheons. She brought the girls to Sunday dinners I wasn't invited to. She positioned herself as the steady one, the bridge, the woman holding the family together while Stephen worked through whatever he was going through. Everyone believed her because she never oversold it. She was measured and warm and consistently there. That was her genius, she never appeared to be doing anything. But underneath the garden luncheons and the Sunday dinners and the sympathetic head tilts, she was building something. She had found my Uncle Frank's oldest wound, the resentment he carried about his secondary role in a company his brother controlled, and she had begun, with extraordinary patience, to press on it. I didn't know any of this then. I was too busy grieving a family that was still alive. It started with a parking garage on a Wednesday afternoon in uptown Charlotte. I had just left a vendor meeting, hard hat tucked under my arm, when I spotted Mary's silver Audi on level 3 of a lot that served a building with no connection to her South Park healthcare office whatsoever. I stood beside a concrete pillar and looked at that car for a long moment. Then I looked at the building directory bolted beside the elevator. Hartwell Capital, Suite 900. I had never heard that name before. I filed it and said nothing that night. But I started paying attention in ways I hadn't allowed myself to before, not because I wanted to find something, but because some part of me already knew something was there. Over the following 6 weeks I noticed receipts from restaurants in neighborhoods she had no reason to visit. Calendar blocks marked WFH on mornings she left the house dressed like she was walking into a board presentation. And then, while reaching for a car charger in her bag one evening, my hand found a second phone tucked beneath a folded scarf. I didn't open it. I placed it back exactly as I found it, scarf and all, and walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water and stood at the sink until my hands stopped feeling strange. That night I searched 2 words on my work laptop, Hartwell Capital. Patricia Cole was a financial auditor I had hired 6 weeks earlier to investigate unusual expense variances in our Eastern Division, nothing personal, purely operational. She was thorough, licensed, and had the particular energy of someone who found irregularities personally offensive. When she slid a manila folder across the conference room table on a gray Thursday morning, I expected construction numbers. What I got was something else entirely. 12 invoices, paid from Deckline Eastern LLC to a consulting firm called Bridgepoint Advisory Group, ranging from $4,000 to $9,000 each. 14 months of quiet, below-threshold transactions that would never have triggered an automatic review. Bridgepoint was registered in Delaware under the name Celeste Marsh, a woman whose entire professional footprint was a LinkedIn profile photo that had never been updated. Patricia had traced Celeste Marsh's registered address to a Nashville mailbox. The same mailbox appeared in financial disclosures connected to Hartwell Capital's managing partner, a man named Gregory Hartwell, age 44. I stared at that name for a long time. Then Patricia slid one more page across the table, a printed photo from a Hartwell Capital firm event, pulled from their website. Gregory Hartwell stood at the center, broad-shouldered, smiling at something off-camera. Beside him, in a black dress I recognized because I had watched her pack it for a conference trip 4 years ago, was my wife. I did not sleep that night. I sat in my home office at 2 in the morning with the blue light of my monitor cutting through the dark, and I built a file the way my grandfather used to lay a foundation, slow, deliberate, and level before anything else goes on top. I had access to a shared email archive Mary had added me to years earlier as a recovery address and had never updated. Inside it, I found their correspondence. It began at a Nashville healthcare conference 4 years ago, a full year before she walked into my parents' kitchen and dismantled my standing with a performance I wasn't there to counter. The early emails were professional. Then warmer. Then, by the 3rd year, something no amount of reframing could explain away. But the affair, as devastating as it was almost secondary to the architecture beneath it. Gregory Hartwell had been quietly pursuing a 40-acre parcel near Lake Norman that Deckline and Sons had optioned decades ago, land my grandfather purchased in the 1980s, now worth conservatively $6.2 million. Mary was his intermediary. The estrangement from my family had not been collateral damage from her ambition. It had been the blueprint. She needed me weakened inside my own legacy so that when she introduced outside advisory support, my family would be grateful instead of suspicious. My uncle Frank had already proposed bringing in Bridgepoint. My father had said he needed time to think. That hesitation was the only wall still standing between her plan and everything it was designed to take. I called my father the next morning and asked for 1 hour. I told him not to say no. He didn't. We met in his study that evening, dark wood, machine oil, my grandfather's photograph watching from the wall behind him. I didn't soften anything. I laid every document on his desk in sequence, the audit, the invoices, the Bridgepoint registration, the emails, the conference photo, the timeline reconstructed month by month. I didn't editorialize or ask for sympathy. I just placed each page in front of him the way you present evidence to someone you respect enough not to manipulate. He said nothing for 11 minutes. I counted every one of them. Then he picked up the photograph of Gregory Hartwell and held it in a way that told me he was not looking at the man but at what the man represented, the specific shape of how completely he had been deceived. He said Mary had attended my mother's garden luncheon 3 weeks ago and brought flowers. I told him I knew. He looked at me then, really looked, the way he hadn't in 2 years, and something behind his eyes shifted. Not an apology. Roland Deckline did not traffic in apologies. But recognition. The real kind, the kind that costs something. He said he should have called me directly the day she told them. I said yes. He should have. Then he picked up his phone and called Frank. "Don't sign anything with Bridgepoint," he said. "Not yet." Mary came home at 7:14 p.m. with shopping bags and the easy composure of someone who believed the ground beneath her was still solid. She saw me sitting at the kitchen island, no phone, no laptop, no glass of anything, and I watched the composure recalibrate in real time. She knew. Not the specifics, but the temperature of the room. She had always been good at temperature. I told her quietly that I knew about Gregory. I knew about Bridgepoint. I knew about the 14 invoices, the Nashville conference, the Lake Norman land deal, and the lie she had performed in my parents' kitchen on a Tuesday in October 2 years ago. She tried 3 approaches in the space of 4 minutes. First denial, crisp and confident. Then reframing, she had simply been securing her future because she had never trusted I would build one worth having. Then something close to offense, suggesting my inadequacy had made all of it necessary. I let her finish every sentence. Then I placed the separation agreement on the counter and told her my attorney's name was on the final page. What Mary had not calculated, the one variable her meticulous architecture had never modeled, was that Patricia Cole had filed a formal fraud complaint with the North Carolina Secretary of State regarding Bridgepoint's invoicing practices 4 days earlier. The complaint was already on record before Mary and I ever sat in that kitchen. Her second phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't reach for it. For the first time in 9 years, Mary Stephen didn't know what to do next. The divorce was finalized 7 months later. Mary did not contest the fraud findings, her attorney advised strongly against it. The Bridgepoint invoices were repaid in full to Deckline and Sons. Gregory Hartwell's firm quietly withdrew its interest in the Lake Norman parcel, and the 40 acres my grandfather bought in the 1980s remained exactly where it belonged. My father and I rebuilt the way men like us rebuild, not with speeches, but with presence. He started appearing at my office door in the mornings again. Coffee, blueprints, the particular silence of 2 people who understand each other without requiring it to be said. My daughters are with me every other week, and on those evenings we eat dinner at the kitchen table with every light on and the television off. My youngest thinks it's strange. My oldest says it's her favorite part of the week. I think about what those 2 years cost me, the dinners, the handshakes that felt like dismissals, the slow erosion of believing I belonged inside my own legacy. I don't carry it as bitterness. I carry it the way my grandfather talked about difficult soil: you learn what you're building on, or eventually the structure tells you. I know what I'm building on now. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, my Uncle Frank asked to meet me for lunch. He said he had been holding something for 2 years. Something about Mary. Something he was ashamed he had never said out loud. I told him to name the place. Thanks for watching, please subscribe and share.